Hello, and thank you for joining today's Power Panel. Today, our theme is Women of Influence, and really what we're going to be doing here is going to be taking a deep dive of how we are doing in the mortgage industry internally and what we can improve externally for our borrowing clients. We have a great panel with us today. Natalie Verrett, President and CEO at Champions Funding, Cindy Nasser, COO of PCV Mercor, and Diane Walker, VP of Processing with Network Capital. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, to get us started, I'd just love to learn more of how you got started in the mortgage industry. I know everyone kind of has a different point of, where they started, where they are right now. Natalie, can you tell us a little bit more about your journey of, where you are now and, kind of how you got started?
It's a long journey. I've been in the business, I'm 42, so I started when I was 17, 20 plus years. I'm not really that fantastic at quick math, but I started off as a junior receptionist because I wasn't qualified at the time at 17 to be a full-time employee. And then from there, I just was a learner. And so I started and moved up from being a receptionist, junior processor, underwriter, and sought out different avenues of how much I can gain access to knowledge. And from there, when I was processing a loan, probably 19 years old, I had a couple with 4 children living in a 2-bedroom apartment that were in the middle of our 9-month process of our transaction because we had to rehabilitate their credit and we used facsimiles with HUD, all that good stuff, right? But they were living in a 2-bedroom apartment and they were going through a divorce because of the stress of it. And we finally closed their loan because we were able to get their credit to where it needed to be. And I'll never forget the day that they came in with their 4 kids crying and thanked me. I get goosebumps every time I tell a story, but they came in and thanked me and said, "Thank you for saving our family and putting us in a better place. You've changed the path of our lives for our children." And that was the moment that I decided I'm not smart enough to be a doctor and I don't have enough patience to go to school for 20 something years, but I can make a difference. And that's what really determined for me to stay in mortgage and do my best to, impact folks' lives. And so from there it progressed and I moved into sales because, the money looked good. And then I moved back into operations and I got a call from Evan Stone, who we've worked with for years. He's a good friend of mine for almost 20 years now. And he said, "Hey, you got another go in you, kid?" And I said, "Yeah, let's do it." And here we are. So
awesome.
Short Cliff Note story.
Well, great. And Cindy, how about yourself?
So I just celebrated my 15th year at PCV Mercor, and we're a service provider to the mortgage industry. We do appraisal management. And I actually started through Bank of America in the call center industry, went from B of A to DirecTV to Yahoo. And I got recruited out of Yahoo to be the director of ops for PCV 15 years ago. And then from there, just learned a lot. I didn't have a clue as to what an appraisal was or anything about the mortgage industry when I started. And now I know more than I care to know about the appraisal industry 15 years later, and just worked my way up and got to be COO 6 years ago. So it's been a fun ride. It's a really fascinating industry. And we really protect the industry by making sure that values are correct and that everyone is giving a fair shot on both sides of the transaction.
Great. Okay. And then Diane, how about yourself?
Well, I've been in the industry forever. I'm older. So I started in 1990, small broker shop where I pretty much learned all aspects of the industry, just for everything, escrow, ops, all of it, and just kind of went from there. I contract processed for a while, got into managing and leading teams, and processing just kind of stuck with me. I never wanted to be an underwriter, never really wanted to do other things. Just processing was just exciting to me. And that's just what I wanted to do, and ended up leading teams. And, I've processed it at the big companies and ended up at Network Capital. Just absolutely love the company, love the owners, and VP of the department where, at one point we had about 175 people under me where I was running the disclosure team and appraisal team. And, my big forte is managing and leading and just trying to make the best atmosphere. And I love what I do, and mortgage has just been where I've been able to do it.
Well, great. So it sounds like the group has been in the mortgage industry for more than 15 years, for everyone. So kind of taking a look back to, how things were 15 years ago, how things were even 5 years ago, and even today, how do you think, the landscape is for, women in the mortgage industry? I mean, really getting to a leadership role. I mean, how has it evolved, over the last couple of years? How are we today? And, what steps really need to be done moving forward? Cindy, I'll go ahead and start with you on that question.
The industry that I'm involved in, the appraisal industry, is 96% male and white. So I walked in and was kind of overwhelmed by that. And that's really the appraisers that are out in the field. And we have a lot of appraisers that are on staff. I fortunately work for an owner that is very much into diversity and inclusion. We have 43% of our staff are women, and 67% are in one way or another part of a minority or diverse group. So as an organization, we are really diverse. As an industry, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to get some more women and minorities into the profession. So obviously, being a service provider, I've walked into a lot of mortgage operations, and I do see that there are more women in the mid-level management range, really big in ops. That seems to be where women really play a key role, is in the operation. But when you look at the business development teams and some of the C-levels and higher execs, you don't see as many women in those levels. But I have seen over the last probably 5 to 7 years that that's starting to shift a little bit, but I don't think nearly as quickly as everyone would like. But there's definitely been a shift in the last few years that I've seen.
Okay. And then, obviously, Cindy, you were talking more on the appraisal side, Natalie, kind of more on the lending side and the funding side. Are you seeing similar things, or?
I mean, I would echo what Cindy has stated. If I were to take myself back to, for lack of a better word, it's a cliche, it's a good old boys club, right? And so you look at, as she said, from, CEOs and executive seats, primarily it was male and Caucasian, right? So I would say that our industry has always empowered women in the sense that we've given them a vehicle to be able to achieve financial goals, because as processors, your income is unlimited because you bonus out and you make some really good money. And I spent a lot of time in the processing realm and make sure that we empower our processors, right? And as underwriters as well, but you don't see as many women in retail sales. You would see them in wholesale as account executives because they're visiting offices. So there has always been an underlying tone and understanding that was a ceiling for women that is beginning to start to be lifted. But at Champions, we're looking to, break through it and just crush it. So if you look at our leadership team, I myself as the president and chief operating officer, I'm obviously a female. And then we have our senior vice president of operations, female, senior vice president of customer relations, female. One of our co-founders is Patty Arviello from New American Funding, female, right? Christy, all of our executives, with the exception of, Evan, our CEO, and 2 others are female led. And it's not that we are looking to infuse that we are women heroes roar. It's who's the most qualified individual for each seat.
Right.
And what's happened in the past, it's not by qualification in the mortgage industry. It's who do you know? Who are you friends with? Who are you related to? Right. And who's going to keep my secrets? So that's why I say the good old boys club, it almost felt like a fraternity. And for me in this industry, I've always said, I don't care. I don't care if you think that I'm a woman and you think that I'm not qualified. I'm going to prove it. And I'm going to speak up when I need to speak up. And that's what's guided me to be able to get to where I am. And for Champions, we're trying to empower our teammates to do the same thing. I don't think that there are as aggressive leaders within this organization as there should be that are empowering the best candidate for the position they're employing. Rather, it's even if they're underqualified, they'll still put them in the seat over a woman or someone of different ethnicity or race than they would of a Caucasian male, simply because of the networking. And it's a shame, but it's changing and it's evolving. And as long as we have some progress, year over year and day over day, that's all that we can do. We're trying to scream it as loud as we can from the rooftops that it should be the most qualified individual, because there's plenty of people that are in those middle level positions that should be executive leaders.
And you had mentioned that it's changing, it's slowly lifting. Diane, any feedback that you want to chime in of, how we can even, speed up and further change this cycle?
I mean, I couldn't agree more with the ladies, as far as I see a lot of middle management and ops being ran by women. I mean, that's pretty much how our company is ran. Whereas then on the sales side, it's more, men are mostly on that side. So there's definitely a lot of work to be done on that. It has gotten better, but for the strong women that are out there, there's just a lot more that we can be doing.
Perfect. And then again, as mentioned earlier, you guys have been in the mortgage industry for north of 15 years. I'm sure you've learned a lot from year 1 to year 5, year 10. Diane, I'll actually keep with you. What advice would you have to folks that are, just starting, things that you've learned over the way? I mean, what advice would you share with people that are just getting into the industry and, just really how to progress as quickly as possible?
I mean, I think just with it, like anything, educate yourself, learning, listening, and just being confident and going for that job and, sharing your ideas. A lot of women maybe step back in a corporate environment and they don't want to share their ideas. They're afraid of failure. They're afraid of embarrassment or what have you. And, just stay strong to what you believe in and have that confidence. And unfortunately, sometimes our worst enemies maybe might be other women. They might feel inferior from you or what have you. And it's just important just to stay who you are. And I think that's any industry. But, I feel like with the mortgage industry, I mean, we can pretty much, we can do it all, so I think the sky's the limit. And I see a lot of young women coming up that I'm just trying to empower and lead and, by example. That's a lot of it. And so it's pretty exciting. I mean, I think it'll get better.
Okay. And then Cindy, any advice you'd share?
Yeah. So to what Natalie said earlier, one thing is to always be assertive and if necessary, aggressive, but really more assertive and letting your work product show who you are and demonstrate your ability and let that shine for you. And to what Diane said, don't be intimidated, right? I oftentimes walk into a room full of men. And for a lot of women, that can be very intimidating. But I walk in there and I know what I'm talking about. I know my craft. And oftentimes, you have to assert yourself for people to pay attention. And they're going to feed off whatever energy you bring into the room, right? So if you walk in feeling confident, if you walk in feeling like you know what you're talking about, they're going to feed off of that energy. So how you represent yourself, I think, is very critical, even though on the inside you might be shaking or you might, not feel so confident inside,
Totally.
right? Which is just human nature. You don't let that show on the outside. So one of my favorite sayings is, you fake it till you make it, but you can't fake your knowledge. So I think to me, oftentimes I felt like I need to know more than the people in the room because that's how I'm going to get their attention and be very confident in what I'm telling them. And that seems to have worked really well. And I think finding common ground, I think oftentimes people think men and women are too different. And, yes, there are differences, but there's also things that we have in common that we can talk about. And just with anybody, once you find that commonality, then you can bridge it and create a connection that way. So and always be authentically yourself, regardless, man or woman, just be authentically yourself, no matter what.
Okay. And then Natalie, any advice that you give to our listeners?
I agree with everything that my fellow companions have stated in regards to all of it, right? So be a learner. And I think that when people hear that, they think that I have to know everything and anything about this topic and in order to be a learner. But in order to be a good leader, you have to be a good learner, right? And so for me, I've always looked at people around me. I hear them and I listen to understand versus listening to respond. So when you are in a room, as Cindy just stated, and you walk in it's a room full of males and you're intimidated and you're shaking your boots, you really just need to listen to understand them and understand what topic and subject matter is being discussed. And from there, don't be your own worst enemy, right? A lot of us will preface, and I've said this before, of never say you're sorry unless you've actually hurt somebody with intent, right? Or you've physically damaged them, because I've seen it and I am a victim of this. I have to tell myself to stop doing this every day. Of what our ideas come to surface in our mind, our inner monologue, we immediately come out and verbally say, I'm sorry, but no, it's, I have a suggestion. This is my proposal. Here's the data analytics I have to support it. And this is what I've done to prove that this works, right? So I would say for all those young females or anyone who's entering into any industry, especially in the mortgage industry, yeah, know your stuff. Clearly, you have to know your stuff, but you are going to be your own advocate. A lot of us, it's part of our nature, and women, most of us, I should say, will say, someone will notice. I'm going to do all the work and then someone will offer. No, you got to take it. You go out and take it. You want that position? You ask for it. You apply for it. You prove your point of why, right? And so use that when you say, I'm going to prove it. Yeah, go ahead. Someone will notice. No, they won't. And if they do, until you ask, they're not going to give it to you. So when we say be assertive or be aggressive, yeah, sure, but take it. Believe in yourself that there could be somebody who's an executive vice president. You're like, I could never do that job. I don't know what they do. Why? They didn't know when they started either. It's trial and error. You accept the fact that you're going to make a mistake, own it, and say, yep, I'm going to make mistakes all the time, but I tried, I gave it my best, I learned from it. Because if you're any leader who's telling you that they are 100% successful in everything they do is full of crap. Because if they're doing something really well, there's other things that are going on the wayside, right? And so what I always tell folks that come to me for mentorship is believe in yourself. If you don't believe in you, no one else will. So take that first step, make sure you're a learner, and then from there, go out on that ledge, because if you don't take the risk on yourself, no one else is going to take the risk for you.
So we've been obviously talking a lot about gender so far, but want to include diversity as well, because that has also been a challenge within the mortgage industry of how do we make, outside of gender, just how do we even just get more minorities? How do we get more diversity and inclusion, within, appraisal, brokerages, lending institutions? Cindy, I'll kick this one over to you. I mean, what do you think can be done to, just further, just make changes from where we were 5-10 years ago, to be a more diverse lending and mortgage and housing group?
So this is a big topic in the industry, but specifically in the appraisal industry now. First thing is we need to be intentional, right? We need to be intentional about bringing diverse and minority groups into the industry. And right now, the way that the system is set up, the barrier to entry is too big. So the traditional model to become an appraiser is normally it's your dad or your uncle or some family member that's an appraiser that then says, hey, you should become an appraiser. And then they become your supervisor and they train you. And that's how they get exposed to that career. It's not something they talk about in college. It's not something that they talk about in high school. Like, here's your career path. You should do this. And the way that it's set up now, based on the supervisory model, is really it's just your family member that's going to want to supervise you. They don't want to supervise anybody else. So when 96% of the appraisers now are male and white, and they're training their family, all that's going to continue, it's going to perpetuate that, right? So there's been things that have been done at the federal level to change the requirements on how somebody can become an appraiser. And they are now marketing to colleges and schools and partnering with the schools to introduce this career to the students, specifically underserved communities. but then now the states have to adopt it. And that's where 33 states have adopted this new path. The rest of them have not. So until 100% get on board, you're still going to see this issue in some areas. So there is some work being done. There's a lot more that has to be done. And then, the way that appraisals are done now are firmly founded in redlining, simply because of how banks used to give credit, and there were actual redline communities, right? And so as appraising has gone on over the years, they're appraising within a very small market area. Appraisers didn't create redlining. They didn't do that, right? This was something that's been systemic for years and years and years. And while banks don't currently redline in the way that they did before, the programs that they have in place when it comes to appraising properties just perpetuates that redlining. And that's another thing that they're looking at, is how do we change this approach so that, minorities can come in to these different areas and they can qualify for the loan and get credit extended to them. So there is a lot that's going on in the industry. And I think that now people are being intentional about it, and most are accepting that there is a problem and that something needs to be done. So we got a long way to go, but the good news is we've started down the path.
Okay, Diane, anything that you want to add?
I think from our perspective at Network Capital, we strive for diversity in our organization, and we embody that across all of our team members in California, Florida, and New York.
Okay, and then Natalie, I know that you mentioned Patty Arviello, who she's been instrumental to Hispanic homeownership, but just even internal of trying to make changes. I mean, what have you and the team over at Champion been trying to do to make it a more diverse workforce as well?
So I think that taking a step back to peel back the layers of this onion really is that we have a generational gap, period, in the mortgage industry because of what happened in 2006, 7, and 8, right? So we have millennials and down that look at the mortgage industry as if it's plagued. Like, you're in mortgage, you're not a good human, right? So let's start there. We're trying to bridge that gap by bringing in younger talent to better understand the mortgage industry, to change it, right? And a lot of folks have, and I've worked at different organizations, we're like, oh, let's go do job fairs at colleges. Let's go and recruit through the traditional outlets to recruit talent, and through hearsay. A lot of people get into this industry because, as Cindy was saying, mom, dad, cousin, friend, whatever, right? For us, it's more of a Champions. We're seeking out the best talent, meaning if you are willing to work hard and you have the right attitude and are ambitious, to me and to us, that equals talent. So we have, instead of going to job fairs, we're going out and recruiting at things of like, okay, let's go look at orphanages that are like in Orange County, right? Where we have young females who were born, raised in these facilities and are now single mothers trying to figure out, how am I going to make my way through this life and empower my child or my children to have a better future? That's talent you can bring in, who's hungry, who's willing to work, who says yes before no. So that's part of it, right? The other part of it is, Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCA, talk to kids that, so if you really think about the populations, if you go to a university, many of these kids don't have a vehicle to get there, meaning financial means. And so where do you want to seek them out? You want to seek them out in their environment and show them the path of, you can bring back into your community and grow. So YMCA clubs, Boys and Girls Clubs, local churches, you go there and you seek them out. And that's what we're striving for, of serving the underserved internally and externally, which goes in line with our product type of also serving the underserved, because as the redlining, as we said, is systemic, right? When you look at, and I'm not trying to throw shade on anyone in this mortgage industry, but the traditional guideline boxes by default are denying these folks who are hardworking individuals who deserve and earn the right to have a home or cash out equity on their home. And they simply can't because they don't fit into the mold, right? But they're more qualified than others who do. So for us, we are very ambitious, and we take it with extremely seriously and have intent and passion towards ensuring we diversify our team members as well as diversify the product mix enough so that all are eligible to apply and to get mortgages and fulfill the homeownership dream that all Americans have.
And we've obviously been talking a lot internally, staffing within the mortgage industry. Unfortunately, when mortgage makes national news, it's usually a little bit of a black eye where race discrimination can be, front and center, which that continues to be an ongoing challenge of, just unlevel playing field, but then just, challenges of, more minority home ownership. Diane, I'll start with you. I mean, what do you think that we need to do as a group to more level the playing field for our borrowing clients and just make it so that it's really the same kind of advantages and perks and not fair treatment towards one group or unfair to the other? I mean, what do you think needs to be done from the lending side to really make an impact on the consumer side?
Our marketing perspective is we market across the country through so many different marketing avenues to get the message across that homeownership is important and it's available. We work with people every single day to find the best solution for them. I think the mortgage industry's changed and it's evolved over the years, and companies like ours that we work to accommodate all, and working across the country with clients, it's our mission to help people live better and do what we can, and that's kind of what we do on a day-to-day basis regardless.
Anything you want to chime in on when it's kind of more thinking external than internal?
Yeah, well, I think they're tied, right? People want to do business with people that look like them or are like them, and I think that that's where New Americans done a really great job in being in the communities where are largely Hispanic and they're being solicited and marketed by Hispanics, right? And I think that they got to see people in the industry that look like them just to build more trust. So I think they're interconnected, that as soon as the inside starts to look differently, then the outside will start to look different. And being, again, intentional about marketing to those communities.
Marketing, right.
Because if we're not there, right, if mortgage companies aren't in these neighborhoods or aren't marketing to these individuals, then it's not going to change. And I think that New Americans paved the way for that and has a really great model for it. And now it just needs to extend to some of the other minority groups out there.
Okay. And then Natalie, what are your thoughts, and just kind of what the Champions team has been doing as well?
I mean, I agree. It starts from within, right? And so it should look and feel unilaterally the same. And so it's unfortunate, like when you look at just the basic application to apply for a mortgage, right? So government monitoring was put into place in order to prevent redlining, right? Are you Hispanic? Are you African American or Black? Are you white, right? So, but what's happened is it's done the inverse of what the actual intent of it was, right? And so for at Champions, we're a CDFI lender. So for us to incentivize people and to show them the barrier of entry is actually not as significant as you think it is, they get a improvement in their price for their mortgage. And so it's even easier for them to qualify, right? Because they get a lower interest rate if they are of a minority group. So that's a piece of it, right? It's a very complex situation in regards to how do you market to them, but at the same time, when they show up at the door, how do you qualify, right? So for us, we use common sense underwriting. If you use common sense application of what really mitigates your propensity to pay as a borrower, it's do you have reserves? Do you have enough equity in your property, right? And is it of good condition? And you have a propensity in your credit that you pay timely, right? For first-time home buyers, they may not have a ton of credit depth, but if they have a gift or a down payment, they should qualify. They should be able to get into a house. So it starts from the inside and then goes out, right? And yes, it should be it's sad to say that it is that way, but it's true. Within a Hispanic community, if there's a Hispanic person soliciting them to bring in a mortgage, they're more inclined to listen, right? But we really need to break past that even further and change that, right? Because really the only deterrent for them is we have folks who don't mark, they say, I wish not to choose, because they're scared of being declined for a mortgage simply because of something that's completely out of their control. They didn't choose to be born a certain race, color, or sex, right? So we're attacking this imbalance within our country from different directions of internally with how we staff, internally with how we mitigate risk from a credit risk perspective of extending mortgages out to borrowers, how we market to them, but also how we educate them, right? When you do buy a house, if you were to, this is how you manage your finances. Because a lot of these kids have never been taught that, or a lot of minorities come here and they don't understand the way that things work, or they do, but they haven't been educated on the way that it needs to be done so that it looks right to fit in the boxes, so to speak, right? And so for us, we, again, are hiring diverse team members within our staff. We're marketing in different ways that are a little bit less traditional in regards to whom we market to, how we market to them. The language that's used isn't super sophisticated. You don't have to be a rocket science or a mortgage specialist to understand what you need in order to qualify for this mortgage, or where we are, how to get to us, right? So the barrier of entry needs to be lowered significantly in order for all folks to be able to qualify for mortgages and to understand, hey, I can actually buy a house and my mortgage is going to cost less than what I'm paying in rent, and I own it. It's an asset. Because if you really think about and look at, our economy and where we are as a country and where we've been, regardless of what your feelings are of the current health of it, at the end of the day, the best vehicle for investment is real estate. If you can wait it out for the cycle, right? Some of this, it used to be a 7-year cyclical cycle, and now it's changed and it's constantly changing because of all the dynamics. But at the end of the day, if you can sit it out and wait for the cycle to come around, you're not going to get that type of return anywhere else. And that's something that's not being shared out there, because in their minds, it's like, I can never even own a house. Why would I even think about investing in homes, right? So we're trying to tackle the challenge from different directions of education, how we market, how we staff, how we mitigate risk for how we extend credit, so that we can come full circle, and then partnering with folks who are, as Patty Arviello, or with other folks, YMCA, local ministers and pastors, wherever we can get ourselves into a position where we can communicate, educate, and extend further out what mortgage is about and how to get into a mortgage or how to get into the industry. We're doing the best that we can. There's more work to be done, but you got to start somewhere.
And for mortgage professionals that are, either new to the industry, they're not in a level of leadership, they may not work for a larger organization, but they want to make an impact, whether it's external in their community, whether it's internal, and really make change. And Cindy, I'll start with you. What would you, advise of how to get started? I mean, are there certain groups that, people could look to, or what would be a good way for more, again, junior members into the mortgage industry to really get involved with making change? Cindy, I'll start with you.
So I think us as leaders need to go out there and make that change, right? And to what Natalie said, market to these underserved communities and some of these organizations. And I'll give you an example. I was a foster child, and growing up in Pasadena, I would drive by all of these craftsman style homes. And in my head, I was like, I'll never be able to buy a house. I'll never be able to live in one of these houses or live where I want to live, right? And so when I bought my house 13 years ago, it still really hasn't registered in my mind that I was able to buy a house, because that little girl made herself believe that could never happen. And it took somebody else showing me and teaching me and saying, yeah, this is possible. This is how you do it. I had friends that taught me about money management and credit. Like one of my best friends said, the best thing you can do is protect your credit. If you have good credit, the possibilities are endless, right? So I think that going out and educating these individuals and giving them hope and that there is opportunity and showing them. I have a lot of people that have come to me and that have known me since I was 8 years old, and are blown away by what I was able to achieve. But I wouldn't have been able to do it without having that mentorship and being shown that it was possible. And you have to give people hope. And the only way that you're going to introduce people to this industry is that the people that are in the industry have to be out there showing them and teaching them about the industry. So it's really up to us, right? We have to be the change that we want to see in the world. And I think that that's how we do it.
Absolutely. Diane, anything that you'd like to add of just, folks that are really looking to make an impact internally and externally in their community?
I agree. Getting out in the neighborhoods. I mean, I have stories just of even our bankers, some of our bankers coming in and, they're like, a year ago, and now I'm successful and I've got this career, and there's some really good stories out there, but that wouldn't have been possible unless our CEO and our COO went out and they recruited, and they went out to these neighborhoods, and they got these you got the interest, and so I really do feel like that's very important.
Natalie, anything you'd like to chime in on for more junior mortgage professionals that may not be in a larger organization, of really how they can make an impact from day one, and kind of further their career and make change?
Be the change, right? Because the reality of it is, something that is not allowed to be said at Champions Funding is, well, that's the way it's always been done. Why are you doing this? Because that's the way we've always done it. Be a shape changer. It starts with you. Right. So we have to look at, generationally, this has continued to cascade down. And it's because someone's like, well, it's not my business. Someone else will say something. Someone else will change it. Right. No, be the person who says something, and you may lose your job over it. Go get another one. Right. Make the change. Don't be that underwriter or that junior underwriter that's looking and saying, oh, and hearing these things happening, report them or say something. Just speak up, because really, when you call people out, they're not as brave about this stuff. If someone's actually confronting them and saying, really, you're going to do that? You're going to appraise this property for that value when you have all these comps and it should be this? Or you're going to not allow this borrower to buy a home when this one that's lateral, but the only difference is ethnicity is approved, right? So be the change. So I'll take you back when I started in this industry. When I was a junior receptionist, there was Hispanic borrowers coming in with a brown paper bag and leaving it at the front desk and telling me, give it to the broker of record, right? And it would happen regularly, like at least 3 times a week. So finally I was like, you know what the heck is in these things? I opened it and there was cash. So I went in and I confronted him. I said, hey, I know this is probably none of my business, but I keep giving this to you. Like, are you laundering money? Are you selling drugs? What are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm making tax returns for them, but I'm charging them like $5,000 per person on their returns. And so I said, what? You're taking advantage of these people when they can just do a FHA loan, or they could do a USDA loan, whatever, right? And he said, well, why not? Everybody else does that. And I quit. And then I reported it because I had nowhere to go. I didn't have a job, and I barely had enough gas to get my young rear end home that night, right? I didn't know how I was going to do anything else, but I had to be the change. We have to, as human beings, stand up for each other and make that impact and that difference. If it doesn't start with you, then who does it start with? Right. And so that's what I would tell them. If you're a setup person, or you're a receptionist, or wherever level you're in, do the right thing, be a good person. And remember, these borrowers, these communities, that could be your mother, your sister, your brother, anyone of your family or a close friend. Like, would you want them to be treated in that way? If you don't, then do the right thing.
Well, again, thank you all for joining us today. Great conversation, great topic, great things for all of us to learn from, whether been in the mortgage industry for a year, 5 years, everything in between, 20 years. So yeah, appreciate all the feedback from our panelists, and for our listeners out there. Yeah, we greatly appreciate you joining as well.